contemporary of Lord Krishna. He was even cousin of Krishna. So Neminath and Krishna are sort of related. And so before Neminath, so first was Adinath. So the Jain tradition is not even founded by Adinath, which is the first Tirthankar of the present time cycle, right? Because Jain believe that this universe or this even time did not start at one point. It's not point A to point B. It's always a cycle. It has been going on ad infinitum. It has started, we don't know when, and it will continue forever. So from the Jain perspective. So even Adinath is not the founder of Jainism. Definitely not Mahavir Swami. Mahavir or Lord Mahavira is not the founder also. Whereas Buddha is the founder, as we know, for Buddhism. So in this long history of infinite millennial history of Jain tradition, what can we see, what can we perceive about the status of women in Jain tradition? We know very little before Mahavir, what happened to women or how women lived before Mahavir, very little, except the mothers of Tirthankars. We know that Adinath, so Jains pay great respect to all the mothers of all the Tirthankaras, right? And even Jain stories or histories, mythology, whatever word we want to use, they have great respect. They have greatly portrayed all the women that give food to fasting Jain monks, Jain ascetics, Jain Tirthankaras. So all the fasts are broken by when women offer with great respect and reverence some food to these great, penance being practiced by the Tirthankaras, ascetics, and monks. So Jain women are always shown as great devotees, great practitioner of austerities. Jain women are at the forefront, have always been at the forefront of doing a lot of fasting in this huge, long history of Jain tradition. We also know that when Mahavir was doing his the most severe fast that Mahavir practiced. So Mahavir fast was the most severe in terms of out of 12 years. So he renounced, he was born as a prince in Pavapuri, not too far again from where you are in Bihar. I was in Pavapuri also last month. And so he was born in Pavapuri as a prince. At the age of around 30, he renounces his kingdom, his family, right? And he becomes a monk. He even renounces all his clothing. So he was probably, we can safely say, was the first fully naked ascetic in the world. He practiced severe penance. He renounced all his food, even water, everything. And from age of 30 to 42 he achieves his enlightenment. I think also somewhere in Bihar, I'm forgetting the exact name. So in Bihar, and so for 12 years he's doing this extreme severe penance, fasting and practice of vow of silence, complete silence, no food, no water. And at the age of 42, he achieves his enlightenment. And now he has to break his within these 12 years, he has to break his long fast. And he has taken a vow that he will break the fast only when a princess that is changed in bangles and changed is completely changed like a prisoner, and she is crying. She has tears on her face rolling down, and if she can offer Mahavir some lentils, some chane ki dal, only then he will break his fast. So Chandana Bala is the name of that princess who is changed, who is enslaved by somebody. And when she offers that food to Mahavir, Mahavir breaks his fast. So Chandana Bala is revered by contemporary Jains as a great devotee of Mahavir. Because of Chandan Bala, we have Mahavir, we could sustain Mahavir for another 30-40 years. He passed away around, I think, age of 80, I think at Shikharji, which is now present in Jharkhand, which also I visited last month, by the way. So I was on this pilgrimage across Bihar, Jharkhand, and so on, and Hastinapur, which I'll get to in a second. So Bihar and Jharkhand is the area where most of the Jainism, most of Mahavir's life was spent. And Chandan Bala plays a great role in sustaining Mahavir for another 30-40 years. So the Jain teachings were preserved, was compiled, and it came down to us, to practicing Jain especially, for next more than 2,600 years, right? So Chandan Bala and then mothers of all the Tirthankars. So this is a brief background, I think. And then I should also mention that Mahavir was the first, probably we can say the first visionary spiritual leader in the world that had no hesitation in dividing the entire congregation, entire Jain community in four segments. Right? So two broad segments were lay people and ascetics. Now within lay people, probably Mahavir was most likely the first person who gave two distinct words for male and female, Shravaks and Shravikas. Right? Jain lay men were Shravaks or Shravakas. Jain lay women were Shravikas. So these are the married people with families and so on, right? Shravakas, those who are listening to the pravachans by Jain ascetics and Tirthankars, Shravakas, males, and Shravikas. This is the first time coined such word to represent women. And similarly, within ascetic communities, right? These are the lay people, Shravakas and Shravikas, right? And within the ascetics, sadhus and sadhvis, right? So monks and nuns. So Mahavir, most likely, or I'm pretty sure that this is the first time ever that he recognized the equality of men and women, both in ascetics, both among the ascetics and among the lay people. Shravakas, Shravikas, sadhus and sadhvis. Not only that, so this is a theoretical, right? On paper, he divided like this, right? Or not divided, but categorized in 4 different segments of the Jain community. But even in reality, even in Mahavir's time, as I will mention the exact number, but even in Mahavir's times, Jain nuns have been exceedingly higher than Jain monks. What is it that attracts women, Jain women especially, to renounce their family, to renounce their chores and daily work, and become nuns? So we see even in the Mahavir's time, thousands and thousands, almost 36,000 nuns, 36,000 women became nuns, and they remained more than monks. So in the entire history of Jainism, 2,600 years of history of Jainism, women have outnumbered men by a huge margin. Even today, there are more nuns than monks. There are more women ascetics than men ascetics, right? More sadhvis than sadhus. But that doesn't mean that sadhvis or nuns have always been the leaders. As we will see, now Jainism is not too different from Buddhism or Hinduism or other traditions where even though numbers have been more, the status of women have always been a bit inferior in practice, a bit inferior to men. Why is that? How is that? What were the debates? What were the issues? Now we will take a look, and please don't get disappointed or get angry or frustrated. These are the traditions that were long before feminism came into our language, or equality or egalitarianism. All of these are new words. What was practiced for thousands of years, the words were the moksha and satya, ahimsa, aparigraha, achaurya, asteya, how to change ourselves to achieve moksha. The concept of equality and so on, which we now take for granted, was still probably a foreign term for most all the traditions for thousands of years until very recently. All right, so now people are still joining and I'm still admitting them. And now let me show you my presentation, if I can figure out how to do that through Google Meet, which is kind of still a new platform for me, but it should be okay. 1 second. Yes, I got it here. Yes, all right. So can you see the presentation now? Stree Moksha. It should be visible to you. If not, you can chat, type in the chat window, but I think it should be okay. All right, let me now present the. All right, so Stree Moksha. Stree means women, moksha, liberation, spiritual liberation, not just social liberation, right? So debates in the Jain sects of Digambaras and Shwetambaras. Yes, I also didn't mention so far, but probably all of you already know this, that like Buddhism has Theravada, Hinayana is now called as Theravada, and Mahayana. Mahayana is in Northern Asia right? Northern Asian countries are all mostly Mahayana countries. Southern Asian countries or Southeast Asian countries are mostly Theravada countries, right? So Sri Lanka and so on, Myanmar and so on are all Theravada, which used to be called as Hinayana earlier. Similarly, Jainism has these two sects of Digambaras, sometimes translated as sky-clad, especially by Dr. Paul Dundas in England, as I mentioned his name earlier also, and Shwetambaras, which means white-clad. So Shwetambaras are always, not all lay people, but ascetics, sadhus and sadhvis, monks and nuns, are always clad in white clothing. And Digambaras, monks do not wear anything. They're completely naked. And Digambara sadhvis are clad in white also. So only monks practice complete nakedness in Digambaras. That's the only segment in the entire Jain community that is completely naked. Right, so that is the literal meaning of Digambara also. Digambara is the word that is also used for Shiva in Hindu tradition, because Shiva is also almost, without clothing. So that's why that's the word used for Shiva also in the Hindu tradition. All right, so Stree Moksha. All right, I see it's still here a beep. Admitted there somebody else now. All right, so as I mentioned, Mahavir lived from 599 to 527 BCE, right? So we say BCE now, not BC, but before Common Era, BCE. He practiced as an ascetic, as a sadhu. He's called in the Jain language, he's called as Achelak Jina. Jina means somebody who has conquered his inner senses. He has conquered himself literally. Achelak means completely naked, without clothing. So Mahavir this is the timeline of Mahavir, 599 to 527 BC. Because he was completely naked after he becomes a sadhu, that is the ideal, that is the highest ideal, especially for the Digambaras, which is, as I said, Digambara means without clothing or complete naked. So Nagna Digambaras, right? Nagna means naked. Digambaras, again, same word. Jin Kalpins. Jin Kalpins means image of the Jinas, right? Reflection or role models in our contemporary world of the Jinas. Jinas are the ultimate, 24 Tirthankaras are the Jinas also. So Jina, since we don't have Jina in our being at present, the contemporary Digambar sadhus are the Jina reflections or Jina role models especially for Digambaras. Now women, since they cannot go completely without clothes, so women are given the highest status that they can achieve within Digambaras are the Aryikas, the noble women. Arya literally means simply noble, so Aryikas means noble women, and Sadhvis, the nuns. Clothes represents possessions, because if you put on clothing from Digambar perspective, that is a form of possession. That means you're not able to completely renounce all your possessions. Still, you're attached to your clothes. So you're not 100% Jina Kalpin as yet, because you still have attachment to clothes. So this is the origin of the controversy. Why this controversy? So I'm just summarizing based on a great paper that Professor Padmanabh Jaini wrote. He just passed away last month, Professor Padmanabh Jaini in UC Berkeley in America. He was a professor there for many, many years, I think 30, 40 years. So he wrote a great pioneering paper in his book, Gender and Salvation in the Jain Tradition. And so what I'm presenting today is mostly based on the summary presented by Professor Padmanabh Jaini, based on his reading, his research of different Prakrit texts. So Jain texts mostly are in Prakrit language. That is what he has summarized. That is what he has translated also from Prakrit into English. So clothing are the possessions. So since women have clothing, so women are not completely detached from all their possessions. So they cannot be called as Jinakalpin. They are not the true representatives of Mahavir or other Tirthankars or Jinas. So women are given the status of Aryaka or Sadhvi. Now, third point. But for monks, right? So for Digambar, completely naked monks who have even renounced their clothing, but they still have Rajoharan. Rajoharan means some kind of a broom made out of peacock feathers, and Kamandlu. Kamandlu is the water that is used for their daily, daily activities, going to toilet and so on, into the forest. So Kamandal is allowed still, and Rajoharan is allowed to cleanse off their path as they're walking. I should also mention that all Jain monks and nuns are not supposed to ride in any vehicle. No car, no train, no bicycle, no motorcycle, no aircraft, nothing, or no ship, nothing. They cannot ride on anything. They always must only walk. But even while they're walking, they should keep clearing their way, their path, as they're walking on any road, any pagdandi, any कच्चा रास्ता, पक्का रास्ता, कहीं भी उनको चलना है, पहले उनको रास्ता साफ करना है और फिर चलना है. So these two are allowed for monks, but women have, in addition to these two things, women also have clothing. So women are equated with Shvetambaras, because Shvetambara, as I said, literally means white clad, and that is also equal to higher Shravakas, higher lay people or higher lay men or higher lay women. They have all the possessions, all the attachments. So Shvetambaras or Digambar women or Shvetambaras in general are like higher Shravakas. They are not fully naked monks. So they cannot be called as Jinakalpin. So these are the hierarchy that Digambaras created. So the naked monk is the highest in the hierarchy, and all the others are below them. And women, Digambar women, Shwetambaras in general, or even higher, or even all lay people are all equated from the Digambar perspective. Now Shwetambaras refute this. What are they saying? They say that fully nakedness or nagnata is Kali Varjya. In Kali Yuga, in this dark age, in this corrupt age, Kali Yuga is widely known in Hindu tradition also. So we all know what is Kali Yuga is. Kali Yuga is where Kalki will come in the Hindu tradition. Kalki will come and fix everything, right? And the dharma will be restored by the Kalki avatar, which is forthcoming according to the Hindu tradition. So in Jain tradition, they are saying that nagnata or nakedness is Kali Varjya, because nakedness cannot be practiced in this morally corrupt age, and it's even anti-canonical. Shwetambaras say that nakedness is not really mandatory from the Jain canonical perspective. Jain granthas, Jain scriptures, Jain texts are not saying that you must practice nakedness to achieve moksha. This is a misinterpretation by Digambaras, as Shwetambaras argue. Right? Then Shwetambaras say that clothes are like dharma upkaran. Clothes are just some tools to aid in your progress, in your growth, on your spiritual path. Clothes are not the prerequisites. So don't make such a big deal about clothing. Why are you so obsessed with clothing? Clothing or not no clothing, what is needed is your psychological purity, psychological focus, psychological concentration, meditation, and all that practice and so on. That is the most important thing, not clothing, as Shwetambaras argue. So this is the debate between two main sects of Jainism, Digambaras versus Shwetambaras. So now we are discussing Shwetambaras. Then Shwetambaras said that moksha is available for both men and women. There is no bias, there is no denial, there is no discrimination against women when it comes to moksha. And these are some of these arguments apparently Shwetambaras took from a third now lost sect called Yapaniya sect. Yapani was the third sect, different from Digambaras and Shwetambaras, which is now lost. But apparently, as Professor Jaini mentions, probably now Shwetambaras took these arguments from Yapani sect, which is now gone. So this is the main sort of crux of the argument between Digambaras and Shwetambaras. Clothing is a huge deal. We'll get into more details now. So from Shwetambaras' perspective, women are capable of moksha because women can also practice right view, samyak darshan, right knowledge, samyak gyan, and right conduct, samyak charitra. Samyak gyan, samyak darshan, and samyak charitra are the prerequisites, ratnatraya, the three jewels of Jainism. Like Buddhism also has three jewels. In Jainism also similar three jewels, right view, samyak darshan, samyak gyan, and samyak charitra are the prerequisites for moksha. And Shwetambaras especially say that not just men, but women are completely capable of practicing samyak darshan, samyak gyan, and samyak charitra. So they are completely eligible for moksha. So that's the Shwetambaras perspective. Now let's see the next one. But now Digambaras come back with fierce argument. Now they're getting really fierce now, and they say now that women, because of their inherent incapabilities, they cannot be, when they fall from their ideal state, they cannot go to lowest hell. They cannot. Since women cannot be subjected to the lowest hell, so there are 7 hells in Jain cosmology. There is Madhyalok is the earth, then above earth is the 7 heavens, and then 7 hells below the earth. So Digambaras say that since women cannot be thrown into the lowest hell, women can also not be expected to achieve the highest heaven, because both are comparable. So since women are not eligible, cannot achieve the highest heaven, they cannot also achieve moksha. So women are by default barred from achieving moksha. That's a very convoluted argument, because they cannot be worst, so they cannot become the best from the Digambar perspective, which is quite problematic, and some of you might be already frustrated, but this is how they argued. Second point, Digambaras are saying because women cannot renounce their clothing, they cannot achieve moksha. We already saw this, but here it is again summarized the Digambar arguments. Third point that they make, Digambaras, that women are poor debaters. They cannot debate as fiercely or as aggressively as men can. So women are not eligible for moksha. Fourth point, so they are inferior in the hierarchies. Like we already saw, women are put as inferior to men by both. That goes, in practice, it's applied for applicable for both Digambaras and Shwetambaras, that they are shown inferior in hierarchy in practice. All right, let's go to the next slide now. And all right, so this is one of the quotes, and for all the quotations, I'm thanking my PhD student, Ms. Shikha Sharma, who is doing her PhD on this very topic from University of Mumbai. She's also among us. She has joined, I think, I'm sure, today's session also. So this is a summary from Padmanabh Jaini's paper, which she provided to me, thankfully. This is by Kund Kunda, one of the greatest, not one of, Digambaras regard him as the greatest scholar who lived, who was born somewhere in Karnataka or Andhra Pradesh, somewhere in South India. And his teachings, his writings are treated today almost like the Digambar scriptures. So what did Kund Kunda say about women? He said, he wrote, and I quote here, in the teaching of the Jina, a person does not attain moksha if one wears clothes. Nudity is the path leading to moksha. All others are wrong paths. The genital organs of the woman, her navel, armpits, and the area between her breasts are said in the scriptures to be breeding grounds of subtle forms of life. How can there be full renunciation for a woman? Their minds are not pure, and by nature they are not firm in mind or the body. They have monthly menstruation, which also leads to a lot of violence in terms of microbes and so on. So all that he mentioned in graphic details in his text, in his writings, and that became the sort of the main focus against women, especially in the Digambar tradition, Digambar sect of the Jain tradition. Digambaras are based on, their criticism is all based on what Kund Kund wrote, which is regarded as the highest scholar, greatest scholar from Digambar perspective. All right, let's go to the next slide. So now again, so Shwetambaras come back and they are trying to refute Digambaras' attack on women. So Shwetambaras say that there are three kinds of libidos. Genders can be of three types, which reminds you of very contemporary debate. Is gender biological or psychological? Is gender anatomical, physical, or psychological? Right. So we know there are males and females, but now we know that there are LGBTQ, right, in contemporary language. So Shwetambaras apparently recognize that non-female, non-male gender, which they referred as hermaphrodite, which is also again a contemporary word, an English word, but what all they're saying is that there could be a third gender also in addition to male and female, and gender may not be strictly physiological or physical or anatomical. Gender can be psychological. And now today, in today's America, especially where I am right now, I'm speaking from Dallas, and there are huge debates, fierce debate going on in America as we speak, where there are dozens and dozens of examples where boys change their gender into female, to girl, girls change their gender into boy, and so it has been going on, very, very actively in this country. In America, they go for surgery, they change their bodies literally, and they change their gender because psychologically they start feeling that I'm no longer a male, I want to become a female. So once psychological changes are happening in one's because of hormones or whatever, they can change their bodies literally. Something similar is being argued here. The genders need not be fixated based on your body. So if it is psychological thing, then there is no difference between male, female, or any other gender, and everybody is eligible for moksha. That is the argument that Shwetambaras are making. Now, these are the arguments we are talking about at least 2 millennia back. 2000 साल पहले इस तरह के तर्क दिए गए, श्वेतांबरों ने दिए ऐसे तर्क दिगंबरों को खारिज करने के लिए, लेकिन वो तर्क अभी भी जारी हैं. The debate is still going on. So these are the three kinds of genders that Shwetambaras recognize. Now let's take up the next slide. Again, a quotation I'm sharing here: psychological gender. This is the argument from Shwetambar side. S means Shwetambar, obviously. D means Digambar. So what is the quote? Quotation is: if a man may be allowed to attain moksha even when he had previously experienced Triveda. Triveda is this feminine, psychological femininity that males can experience, right? So if a man may be allowed to attain moksha even when he had previously experienced Triveda, which was unnatural to him, then there are no grounds for denying moksha to a woman when she also similarly experienced Triveda, which was of course natural to her. Right? That makes sense to you, I hope. That, just as males can experience sometimes feminine qualities psychologically, and they might, show traits of a female. If male can show traits of female and still attain moksha, then what is wrong, or what is the issue with females also trying to achieve moksha? Right? That is the argument being made by Shwetambaras again 2000 years back, which is, I think, which looks quite progressive to me. But that's the argument by Shvetambara, psychological. So gender is simply a psychological state. Gender cannot be fixated on biological traits of a body, male or female. That is the argument. Right. Now the Digambaras come back with their, again, fierce arguments from Digambara side, very graphic. And I apologize in advance if somebody is very, it can make you feel very uncomfortable, like some of us. So Digambara is saying that women genital organs, the area between their breasts, is life breeding grounds to infinite microbes, which is leading to a lot of violence. Their menstruation causes a lot of also microbes in their bodies. So again, a lot of violence to those microbes. Women have inherent sexual desire, shame, and fear. And so they have this inherent implicit need for clothing all the time. So female body, by definition, by their biological traits, are ineligible for moksha because of this lot of violence in their body, as being argued again by the Digambar side. I'll just go to the next slide now to share one more quote. Female body issues. So what are Digambara saying? They are saying that so quotation here is, a female body is not able to destroy the hosts of karmas because it is produced in association with that evil karma called wrong view, mithyatva. So just as there is samyak darshan, there is also mithyatva, which is opposite of samyak darshan, as is the case with the bodies of hell beings and so forth. So women are now being compared with hell beings in hell. So birth as a woman is a sure indication that the soul inhabiting that body was endowed with mithyatva at the moment of birth, because only a soul or only a jeev that is endowed with mithyatva, right? Wrong view, not the samyak darshan, but mithyatva, wrong view. Only that person, only that jiva or that soul will take the body of a woman. This is the argument from Digambar side. Again, very fierce, very anti-women, as some of us might call it. These are some of the arguments that I shared. Now I shared some example of, so there, like I mentioned, there are 24 Tirthankaras in our present time cycle. Out of 24, Mahavir was the last, right? And then there was a figure called Mallinath or Malli Devi. So there is another huge argument between Digambaras and Shvetambras. So story goes that King Mahabala had 7 friends, and out of his some of the immoral things that he practiced, he was born as a female, as Malli Devi, and Malli Devi then achieves moksha. So Malli Devi is regarded as only female Tirthankara, but only by Shvetambaras. Digambaras say that no, Malli Devi was actually, Mallinath was a male, and all 24 Tirthankaras are only males from Digambar perspective. But from Shvetambar perspective, Malli was a female. So 23 male Tirthankaras and Malli 1 female Tirthankara from Shvetambar perspective. But both agree, both Shvetambars and Digambar both agree that he shows these female traits biologically or psychologically because of the cheating or crookedness that she practiced. So that is the story or example of Malli. She is allowed moksha. She is allowed to become a Tirthankar by Shvetambaras, but Digambaras don't even allow that, and they say that no female can ever become Tirthankara. That is the Digambar perspective. All right. So now the point of clothing. So Shvetambars are now arguing again about clothing, and they are saying that clothing is simply a possession, but not attachments. So it's a physical need, but one need not be attached to their clothing, right? Then Shvetambars say that nuns are wearing clothing, but because it is compelled by the society, and nuns cannot be allowed to go fully without clothing because the society demands this. But then Digamara said no, but the clothing is the breeding ground for lice, for all these microbes and insects and whatnot. So they are, and also because they are attached to their clothing, they are not eligible for moksha. That is the Digambar argument once again. And then now, what is this quotation about Shvetambara view on clothing? So they say there are nuns picking up clothing. So the argument is being made is what happens if a clothing is removed from a nun? So what happens? What is her automatic reaction? This is the quotation from Shvetambar side. A nun's picking up clothes is comparable to a naked monk picking up his whisk broom when he rises from his meditation, an act that is also deliberate and yet considered blameless. Clothes, therefore, should not be considered an impediment to moksha for women. Just as a monk who he would pick up his broom to clean off his path or way where he's walking. Similarly, a nun would pick up her clothes and wear the clothes and will just go about her daily whatever practice she's doing. So this is a natural reaction to society. It is not an attachment to clothing. That is again a defense of clothing by Shwetambar perspective. Right, and so the argument goes on and on. All these quotations are coming from all the different debates that have been happening among the Digambaras and Shwetambaras for last two millennia. All right, next is the debate, the issue of debates. So Digambaras are saying that the women are unable to develop occult powers, right? The miraculous powers to invoke guardian deities in the debates. So when debates are happening, maybe between Hindus versus Buddhists, Hindus versus Jains, Buddhists versus Jains, Digambaras versus Shwetambaras, in that debate, in those debates, one needs these miraculous occult powers to invoke guardian deities to win the debates. Digambaras say that women cannot do that. Women are ineligible to invoke guardian deities. But Shwetambar says debates are not prerequisites for moksha. What is prerequisite is Samyak Gyan, Samyak Darshan, and Samyak Charitra. Even if they cannot invoke guardian deities, they can still win the debates because of her practices. So, and Shwetambaras also say that silence is practiced by many Tirthankaras, including Mahavir, for a long time. So silence, Maun Vrat, is more important than debates and arguments and so on. So that is again the debate, issue of debate as argued by Digambaras and Shwetambaras. That's another difference between how they react, how do they approach the liberation or moksha for women. So women and the highest stages. So Chakravarti is the highest state for householders, for lay peoples, for grihasthas. जो भी गृहस्थ हैं, उनके लिए highest stage जो है जैन tradition में वो है चक्रवर्ती का status दिया जाता है, almost like a king. And Indra is the highest state for gods. That is, Indra, what we all know, also in Hindu tradition, Indra is the leader of all the devtas in Swarg. So that is the highest state also in Jain tradition, the Indra status. So women can achieve some of these status, at least in Shwetambar tradition, but they cannot become Tirthankara or Jina, especially again from Digambar perspective. Now we see some of the numbers that I already shared with you in the beginning. Jainism remains, despite all these fierce debates that have been going on among Digambars and Shwetambars, we know that world's oldest and largest order of nuns is in the Jain tradition. In Mahavir's times, there were 14,000 monks, sadhus, 36,000 nuns in Mahavir's time. So sadhvis outnumbered more than double the number of monks even in the Mahavir times. And in contemporary times, there are apparently there is no exact numbers, but this is an estimate. There are almost 9,000 nuns and 2,600 monks. So almost more than 3 times of the number of monks that we have in nuns. And in Digambar tradition, there are fully naked monks. There are almost 100 monks that are present, at least 100. There may be more now. The numbers may be a little bit outdated. But it just gives you a rough estimate of how nuns have outnumbered monks for all the history of the Jain tradition. So nuns have always been more than monks in the long Jain history. Then let me also mention, this is coming from a paper by Professor Manisha Sethi at Jamia Millia University in New Delhi. And she has nicely categorized, again, based on her reading of Prakrit text in the Jain tradition, where, Urdhva Loka or Swargas, Madhya Loka is the Prithvi, earth, and Adholoka, the hell. In all of these 3 realms, there are several goddesses that are probably borrowed from Hindu traditions, such as Saraswati and Lakshmi, that are in the Urdhva-loka. In the Adholoka, there are Padmavati. Sorry, this is not hell, but Adholoka within a lower heaven, right? Lower heaven, middle heaven, and highest heaven. So in the lowest heaven, there are Padmavati, Charkeshwari, and Ambika. These are the goddesses that Jains worship. Almost in all Shwetambar traditions, Shwetambar temples especially, you'll find Padmavati image, Padmavati Murti for sure. All the Shwetambar traditions, all the Shwetambaras, they worship, they revere Padmavati, but also Saraswati and Lakshmi. That is most likely a borrow from the Hindu tradition. So goddesses are worshipped by Jains also, especially the Shwetambaras. Then Chandanbala Surya, I already mentioned, the one who broke the fast of Mahavir, so greatly respected by all Jains. So And Chandramala eventually joins Mahavir's monastery, and she becomes the leader of 36,000 nuns in the time of Mahavir. Rajimati was the wife of Tirthankar Neminath. Neminath was the 22nd Tirthankar, cousin of Krishna, as I mentioned in the beginning, and she was the wife of Neminath, so highly respected, revered by Jains. Maina Sundari was an ideal wife, a story after Mahavir. So she was born after Mahavir, and she is highly regarded because she was an ideal Jain practicing wife. And all the other mothers of Tirthankaras, such as Trishala, mother of Mahavir, and Marudevi, mother of Rishabh or Adinath. The first Tirthankar's mother, Marudevi, is highly revered by Jains, and Trishula, the mother of Mahavir, is also highly revered by all Jains. These are called as the great satis. Sati, again, word that we all know in Hindu tradition also. A noble woman, right? A noble woman is literally the meaning of sati. So this is the present-day Digambar nun, currently living in New Delhi. I met her also last month when I was in India. And she has almost literally transformed Hastinapur, a city we know the name from Mahabharata times in present-day Uttar Pradesh now, about 3 hours from New Delhi. Hastinapur is now a great pilgrimage center. I couldn't find any Hindu temple or any Hindu center or any ruins from the Mahabharata times in Hastinapur when I visited there last month. But Hastinapur has been transformed into a Jain pilgrimage place because of the efforts by Mata Gyanmati ji, who was born not too far from Hastinapur. I think she's from Muzaffarnagar. Yeah. And so she chose Hastinapur as her main center. And Hastinapur, she has established a lot of temples there, a lot of huge sort of a museum, Jain library, temples, and so on. Because of her efforts, Hastinapur has become today a pilgrimage center. And she has translated and published many dozens of books and many scholarly work that she has published. And she has given a lot of discourses in Hindi and across. So among the Digambar community, she is probably the most highly regarded, revered Jain nun, currently at the age of 80 plus, definitely at the age of 80, more than 80 now. She's 80 years of age, and she's presently in New Delhi, not too far from Connaught Place, where I met her at the Agrawal Jain Mandir near Connaught Place. That's Mata Gyanmati ji from Digambar perspective. And from Shwetambar perspective, in Bihar, currently in Virayatan in Bihar, now very close to Nalanda University in Bihar, where also I visited last month, and she has established Virayatan. So she chose Virayatan as her center of her activities, where she established a lot of hospitals, schools, colleges, temple, museum, library, and so on at Virayatan. So the place is now called as Virayatan. Veer, word coming from Mahavir. So Virayatan is not too far from Pavapuri, where Mahavir was born. Pavapuri, Nalanda, and now Virayatan has become a major attraction especially for Jains in Bihar. So that's Acharya Chandanaji. She was a nun in the Sthanakvasi subsect within Shwetambar sect. So like I mentioned, Digambars and Shwetambars are the two sects. Within Shwetambar, then there is a subsect called Sthanakvasi that does not believe in Murti Puja. So in there, they don't build huge temples. They don't have Murti Puja. So within Sthanakvasi, she was one of the nuns. And then she leaves Sthanakvasi subsect also, and she starts her own kind of congregation. And she was now then made as a first ever Acharya in the Jain tradition. As I mentioned, in the 3 millennia of Jain history, a nun was never made a full leader of a congregation, Acharya. But Chandanaji was made the Acharya, the first ever Acharya, and she's thankfully still with us. I mean, she's still leading all her efforts in philanthropy, education, health, and so on. And she's almost now also at the age of 80 at present-day Virayatan in Bihar. And so that's Acharya Chandanaji. And as I mentioned, all the quotations came from Ms. Shikha Sharma. And thank you all for listening. I hope it was not too technical, but if it was, I can take some questions and discuss your comments, your questions, and so on. So, but the presentation is over now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Pankaj. Your presentation was very clear and very lucid, and I hope the listeners will not face any problem in understanding, because your language was also very simple. I have seen that how clearly you have explained that women have always been outnumbered men in Jaina monastery, and present condition also you have shown that the women are always outnumbered. in the history of more than 2,000 years. Although Jainism was one of the earliest tradition that give equal access to women, as you have rightly mentioned, but not in practice, in theory. Women were also discussed intensely in some of the texts which you have given the debate of Shvetambara and Digambaras. This webinar has summarized the issues and development for women in Jainism, led by some of the important leaders, which you have mentioned some of the name like Chandana ji in Bihar and Gyanmati ji in Uttar Pradesh. So the presentation was now open for discussion, and I would like to, I would just check whether in chat box if there is any question. I don't see here any question. So if anyone is interested to ask anything, it's now open for discussion. Any comments? Most welcome from any, even students may ask.
Yeah, even
I
my
can
Yes,
see
yes,
some.
students.
Yeah.
Yes, somebody is asking.
Yes, please.
Okay, please.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Shubha.
Namaskar, madam. Yeah, she
Yes,
is
yes,
Subhadra
you can
and
ask.
myself is Parthasarathy. Yeah. See, I congratulate sir for his wonderful lecture. But I went to Mudbudri. I think you know about that. The Mudbudri is the Jaina temple, and
Mhm.
I saw
Yeah.
the Lakshadweep program there in Mangalore. So, but I have not seen any nun there, I think, till now. But
Okay.
you told that Mata Gyanamati from Digambara sect and Acharya Chandanaji from Shvetambara sect is the now in highest position. So may I say that Mata Chandanaji, Acharya Chandanaji will get the moksha and Mata Gyanamati will not get the moksha. What is your opinion in this perspective?
Okay. All right. Good question. I mean, I am no one to decide who will get moksha or not. From Digambar perspective, if we think from what I presented based on what Professor Jenny had translated from, I think Digambar texts will say that no woman can achieve moksha from Digambar perspective. I mean, I'm no one to judge. From Shwetambar perspective, okay, let me actually go back and say that in the present, so we are at the lowest end of the most negative time cycle. We are in the Kali Yuga, right? In the Hindu tradition also says that we are in the Kali Yuga. So Jain tradition also says that we are in the most evil time currently. So nobody can achieve moksha actually. No male, no female can achieve moksha. Nobody can become a Tirthankar or Jaina or moksha, can achieve moksha. So nobody can achieve. But so that's the general conclusion from all Jains. But now going specifically within Digambar, again, a woman cannot achieve. Shwetambar, yes, they can achieve. So that's the general answer I can give. Otherwise, who am I to judge anybody, right?
No, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
But I've not been to Mudbudri. I would like to go once at least, maybe next trip soon.
Any more questions from student sides, research student side? If any question or query,
If Ms. Shikha Sharma is on the webinar, she can also share. She is working on this topic as we speak. Or any other student, I welcome.
Pranam, thank you, sir. I'm
Vidyut Mandal, yes, please.
yes, sir. You said that there was no founder of Jainism, and Adinath was the first Tirthankaras.
Right.
So, sir, my question is how it start as a separate religion,
Yes, yes.
Jainism.
Correct.
Uh,
Yes. So Jains believe, Vidyut Mandal, yeah, Jains believe that Jainism never really started and it will never end. They also say that the loka, the word for universe they use is loka. This is the structure of Jain loka. It's like a man or human being standing with the hands on their middle region. That's how they structure the loka, the universe. And they say that the universe was always here, will always remain here. There is no end to universe, there is no start to universe. So there is no creator of the universe, there is no destroyer of the universe from the Jain perspective. So it was always here. The teachings, they come in the negative time cycle, the teachings get lost. Positive time cycle, the Jinas and Tirthankaras come back and they re-establish the Jain Dharma. So this cycle has been going on ad infinitum. It will keep going forever. It has been going forever. It will keep going forever. That is the Jain view. And so the Jain philosophy, Jain tradition, Jain Tirthankaras has always been a distinct tradition, different from Vedic tradition. So Jains reject Vedas. Jains reject all the Hindu rituals. The Jains also do not accept Varna system or Jati system. That is at least theoretically, right? So Jains are all really, outside all these Hindu practices. But Jains do agree with karma theory, the Punarjanam, reincarnation, and some of the philosophical ideas. Moksha, for example, also Jains accept. Atma also they accept. But then Jain Atma, even after moksha, it remains separate and distinct from Brahman. So in Hindu tradition, Vedanta tradition, Advaita especially, all the Atmas, right, all the Jivas, Atmas, they merge with Brahman, right, from Advaita, in Advaita. In Jain tradition, there is no Advaita, there is no Dvaita. Every Atma will remain separate and distinct even after moksha. It will go to the highest layer in the universe, Siddhashila, in the Loka, in the highest sort of final frontier of the universe. And it will remain there forever in its purest form, in its more energetic form. But that Atma will remain separate and distinct. There is no Brahman to merge. So that is the Jain view of moksha, which is quite different from the Hindu or Buddhist perspective.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Hello, Professor. Thank you for your presentation. I need a clarification on this particular topic. Padmanabh Jaini also talked about, moksha in non-Jain tradition. He talked about traditional Brahminical society. So I need a clarification whether the problems or the complication faced by women in Hindu tradition is same as the complication or the complexities faced in Jain tradition, as far as moksha is concerned.
Yes, I think, if I recall correctly, I think Professor Jaini really, with all the negativities in these debates about women's moksha, Professor Jaini congratulates Jain scholars that at least they thought so deeply about the moksha for women, even though Digambars were strictly against it. They were not, allowing women to achieve moksha. But at least the debate was in such fine details, and Shwetamara that sort of indirectly, I think, encouraged Shvetamaras to more and more argue for moksha for women. So that sort of opened the doors for Jain women, at least in the Shwetamara tradition. That's what I think, if I can summarize correctly, Professor Jaini's arguments, his conclusion. And in Buddhist tradition, I recall that Buddha was highly reluctant to even allow his own mother and his wife and mother, who eventually joined his order, his monastery, but he's highly reluctant. And he even apparently predicts that within 500 years, because I'm allowing women to join my order, to join my Sangha, my whole Sangha will collapse within 3, 4, 5 centuries. And that actually happens within India. Buddhism almost disappears. Buddhists, they flee South Asia, Indic subcontinent. They move to Tibet, and from Tibet to China, to Japan, or down southwards to Sri Lanka and Myanmar and Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore. But within India, they largely disappear. Who knows what was the reason? But Buddha did predict that that will happen. So he was very reluctant about women. Women said also in the Buddhist tradition, he always kept nuns inferior to monks, which is also true even for Shvetambharas in the Jain tradition. So if a junior monk is in the congregation, and if a senior nun is also in the congregation, senior nun must bow down to a junior monk, even if monk is, अगर एक दिन पहले ही वो monk बना है, साधु बना है,
yes,
है जो 15 साल से नन उस ऑर्डर में है, संघ में है, साध्वी को हमेशा साधु के सामने झुकना है. ये बुद्धिज्म में, जैनिज्म में, हिंदुइज्म में, मुझे लगता है सब जगह ये है, इश्यू है. लेकिन इतना ही कहना था प्रोफेसर जैनी को कि एटलीस्ट उनको मोक्ष का उत्तराधिकारी माना गया, श्वेतांबरों ने माना महिलाओं को भी. इतना ही हम कह सकते हैं पॉजिटिव नोट पे.
थैंक यू.
वेलकम.
Anyone else?
Ma'am, can I ask something?
Sure, sure, sure. Shuma.
Sir, yes, sir, I have a general query. Is there any caste system in Jainism, or all person are equal here? And the second one is in Buddhism, female are banned in Buddha Vihar, or 90 years old female or nun have to be respect. 9 year, even 8 or 9 years old boys.
Yes,
Uh,
correct.
so there is difference between Buddhism and Jainism. In
Correct.
Jainism, all person are equal. And is there any caste system in Jainism?
Theoretically, there is no caste system in Jainism, theoretically. But in practice, yes, there are, Digambars and Shvetambars rarely ever will intermarry each other. Shvetambars will marry only within Shvetambaras, Digambars will marry only among Digambaras. And most Tirthankaras, not most, I think all Tirthankaras were all Kshatriyas or kings or princes who renounce their wealth and kingdom and become Tirthankaras. So you can interpret it in different ways. Brahmins were always inferior to Kshatriyas in the Jain tradition. So Tirthankaras will then recruit Brahmins as their Gandharas. So their congregation leaders will be Brahmins. So there is something going on. There is some tension between different Varnas because Brahmins are the most superior in Hindu tradition. Jainism kept Brahmins under Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas can become Tirthankaras, the highest, right? And then the Brahmins come under Kshatriyas. So there is a Jain hierarchy, implicit hierarchy. Theoretically, they all, they don't accept Varnas and Jatis and castes and whatnot. But in practice, yes, there are these issues going on even in the Jain tradition. And then, yes, you rightly pointed out, even in the Buddhist tradition, a nun must always respect even a boy who is maybe 5 साल का बच्चा अगर साधु बना है, मेल है, और अगर एक 80 साल की साध्वी है, तो साध्वी को हमेशा प्रणाम करना है, उस बच्चे को भी, यंग साधु को भी. तो वो तो बुद्धिस्ट ट्रेडिशन में भी है, जैन ट्रेडिशन में भी है, सब जगह है वो इशू. तो है ही, हायरार्की का इशू हमेशा है, वो मंक्स को ऊपर माना गया है नन से, दोनों में, बुद्धिज्म में और हिंदू.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sure, thank you, welcome.
Anyone else?
Ma'am, can I ask another question?
Sure.
Sir, you told that Neminath was contemporary of Krishna. Is there any reference? If possible, sir, please give me some reference, sir.
Yes, there are Jain texts in Prakrit language, such as Adi Puran and many other texts that have there is even Jain Ramayana, Jain version of Ramayana, Jain version of Mahabharata that provide all these references that Neminath was cousin of Krishna and so on. Krishna is not regarded very highly in Jain tradition because he led to a lot of violence in the Mahabharata war, as we know. So Jains don't like Krishna much. Yes, so there are all those references in the Mahabharata, Jain Mahabharata and Adi Purana and other texts. Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone?
I think that's it. We'll stop now.
That's it. Okay. Professor Jain, before stopping, I just would like to ask you one thing. It's not a question that you have to answer right now, since your PhD scholar is also working on this area. So I'm just interested to know that the debate which you said regarding the Svetambara and Digambara, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the condition of those debate which started in 2000 years ago, and what are the, what is its status in present condition? Present monasteries of Jainas are strictly, Digambara especially, are strictly following those rules which were there in 2000 years ago. Because I have seen that you have mentioned Gyan Mataji. She is from Digambara sect, right?
Yes.
So what is the condition of those debates? Are they strictly following which they were trying to follow that time? And today also the condition is same of those kind of debate, or if it is same, then the women must be facing a lot of challenges, right? So, and you are saying that women are outnumbered. In Digambara also there are women, isn't it? So I just wanted to know what is the present scenario. If Shikha can also answer if she is working on this, and if this is her area. Shikha can also comment
Yeah.
on this. No
Right.
problem.
Shikha, you want to add anything? Do you want to respond? Or I'll jump
So
in. I
sorry, I
think,
missed the
yeah,
question. So sorry, I missed it. I missed the question. I missed your. I mean,
the present status of these debates in the contemporary Jain society is the question.
okay. So it's better if you can answer it
All
because
right.
I'm still
Let me jump
working
in,
on.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Yeah, so Professor Oja, yeah, contemporary society is, I think, which is, I think, similar in Hindu tradition also. You know, on the one hand, Hindus have put some of the goddesses even higher than gods. I think Saraswati, Lakshmi, Durga are the highest goddesses, right? But not all women in Hindu society are enjoying all the equality, or right. They, you know, there are some issues. Let's just say that. So something similar, I think, is going on in the Jain tradition, in the Jain society also. On the one hand, there are these highest ranking nuns such as Gyanmati Mataji, which are highly regarded by her followers, especially, right? But on the other hand, I think some of the debates are still pretty similar to what's going on. So some of the views are very similar to what we saw in in our summary of those debates. That yes, women can become nuns, can become sadhvis, but can they lead a congregation? Can they become acharya? That is the question. So we have only one example in almost 3,000 years of history of Jain tradition. We have only one example where a woman can become actually acharya, which is Acharya Chandanaji in Virayat and Bihar. But even she is not all, you know, she was not welcomed by all the sects of Jainism. Only one subsect of Shwetambar sect accepted her as the highest acharya, right? So she had to face some challenges also. Let's just say that. So the debates are still going on. The issues are still very much there. Theoretically, it's all equal, especially in the Shwetambar tradition. But the reality is still, it's still ongoing. It's an ongoing issue, like in other societies, like in other traditions. Nothing is ideal. Everything is, has some plus and minus, and the issue goes on, and people are still working on the issues.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Jain. And I would like to request Shikha Sharma to please look at these discussions as you are working on this. And all the best, Shikha. And once
Thank you
again,
so much, ma'am. Yeah.
thank you so much, Professor Jain, for being with us. And the formal thanks will be given by Professor Niranjan Jaina, Head of the Department of Sanskrit. Thank you so much.
Well, how to share our words of praise, or how to extend our formal vote of thanks. Just let me share some experience and feelings. When I was in Pune, Maharashtra, I came across some of my friends, colleagues and scholars. I heard Professor Pankaj Jain sir's name many times, but we could not meet to each other. This is the occasion and my privilege to listen him directly. When in Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, there was an eminent scholar, Professor Poddar. He was in charge of making the Jain dictionary. I remember, if I am right. And Dr. K.K. Jain, now also he is in Bhandarkar, K.K. Jain sir. And another madam, Dr. Bimla Bafne, Bimla Bafne madam. And always we are just like friends, but I learned many things from them. How the Jain culture and system and society and behavior. So I was very much impressed. If we want to know the real culture of India, then we must learn to Jain culture. as sir told, we have two aspects of our knowledge system which we follow in society, like theoretical part and practical day-to-day life. Without practical application or behavior, we cannot realize the theoretical things. So, really, today's topic is very interesting. So far, the broader concept with religion or Jainism is concerned, any ism, religion is concerned, we have that unity in diversity. We may various tradition, Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever we call Vedism, sometimes little bit vary, but here we get the oneness when practically we realize it, we observe it. Anyhow, today, indeed, we are very much enlightened by the noble speech of Professor Pankaj Jain sir. He has provided a broad idea within very short time. Within very short time, he has provided. He has covered the entire system through the aspect that is women and feminism, but in general, how to follow the path as a human being in general and women in particular. He has enlightened us, and so far the women has the vital role in the society or at home, any home. Like charity begins at home, discipline begins at home. At home, mother has the vital role, and since the contest is very relevant, and we are very much enlightened, on behalf of our Department of Sanskrit, Pali and Prakrit, Vishwabharati, I thank sir for your enlightening speech. And sir, if we if time permits, the situation makes normal, we'll have a lecture in Santiniketan directly from your direct presence. This is online, so we heartily invite you sir, and we'll be very happy when we'll see you in physical, and I hope it will be one day, the day will come, we can get more knowledge, and we can get sanidhya, your sanidhya like this. So I thank you, sir. I think here the scholars from all over India, and I just noted few names. Professor B.B. Sharma was present, Dr. R. Kumarswamy, Dr. Sabita Sounial, and Madam Research person Sikha Sharma from outside in this. They are present, and all our colleagues from Vishwabharati and West Bengal and all other part of country, and the at least, but our students, they have a very important role, because without their presence, the lecture is not fruitful or success. So I thank them all for their patience hearing. And today, more than 100 participants were present on this web, this group, but more than the Facebook link was there. So many participants were interested when they heard the lecture of Professor Pankaj Jain sir will be organized. Then they are very much happy, and with a huge number they joined. I thank them all, and I thank my colleague, my friend, Dr. Rekha Ujha, Department of Philosophy and Comparative Religion, Vishwabharati. She is always an instrument to inspire me and our department. Otherwise, we could not have organized this thing. She proposed me and told about Professor Pankaj Jain sir's lecture. And today, earlier actually we could have organized quite 3-4 months back, but sir was a little bit busy. So that's why we could not get him. But today we are so happy to get him and to listen his speech, and really we are very much enlightened by his noble speech. And I thank all the participants once again. I thank all. With these few words, I think here we can stop. Before ending the thing, we can pray in this pandemic situation. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pasyantu, ma kaschid dukhavak bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.